when Jesus would go to the castaways, I call them, or the dregs, and he would get rebuked for it. And he would go to the sinners, the world.
Amen.
And the Pharisees hated that. They would rebuke him and what he was doing. The unclean. And you can read in chapter 14 about the chief Pharisees. They watched him in chapter 14. Watched him while it was the Sabbath day. And this was when Jesus questioned them and asked him, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? And this was the man with dropsy. And they didn't answer him.
They didn't want to.
They were condemned.
That's right.
They were stuck.
That's right.
How could they answer him? So they held their peace. But Jesus didn't.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's when he, in the next chapter, in chapter 15 of Luke, he gives them 3 parables. And it's, the 3 parables are the parable of the lost sheep, of the piece of silver, and then the prodigal son. And I believe that he did that. Every step that he took was ordered.
Amen.
He wasn't doing anything by
That's right.
by chance or circumstance. So he was getting rebuked by the chiefs of the Pharisees for healing. And they were condemning him because of the law, because their rituals and their traditions forbid them for healing on the Sabbath day. And Jesus was trying to explain to them and to teach them the difference between the worldly foolish things and then the things of mercy and salvation and spiritualness. And I love it, and I wrote about it when I wrote the circular letter a couple years ago. At one point Jesus asked them, do you remember what David did when his men were hungry?
That's right. That's right.
And they had a great temple there, and they would put offerings out to it. Meat and food and bread and all things that were precious to them. And it was unlawful for any of them except the high priest to eat of those offerings. Unlawful for him to. And David's men were hungered one time. And David went into the temple and he took the shewbread and he ate it and he gave it to his men.
Yeah, sure did.
And Jesus asked him, do you remember when David did that? Because there's a way that may seem lawful unto a man.
That's right.
But the end thereof is death and destruction. And you know, that parable that he speaks about, when he asks them, he says, if any of you which have an ass or an ox fallen into a pit on the Sabbath day, would you grab it and pull it out and save it?
Or wait till the next day.
And the same thing, a few verses later, he says, what man of you having 100 sheep, if he loses one, would not leave the fold 99. Forsake them and go and find that which is precious. That which is precious to you. Listen. And when you found that little sheep that you'd lost, which of you wouldn't pick it up and carry it, put it on your shoulders and carry it back? People, don't you understand that that's the way my Lord is this morning? He's not about, listen, there's just a handful of us here. Listen, what right, listen, do we have to shout and be thankful? Listen, what cause is there then would bring us out here on a Sunday morning? Listen, when no doubt any of us could have had an excuse to stay home. But aren't you glad, listen, that when my Lord was brought before Pilate, then he didn't have an excuse. He didn't make up any excuses. Don't you understand that he had a legion of angels at his beck and call? All it would have took was for Jesus to say, I can't do it anymore. Come, Father, send him. Come and get me.
We'd all been lost.
But aren't you glad that he was looking way ahead to a ragtag little family here in North Carolina? Listen, that needs him, that feeds off that spirit. Aren't you glad that he didn't make an excuse? And when he found me in a little basement up in Michigan there, listen, he picked me up and he carried me home.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead and sing, shall we? A little prayer.